Hey there, I'm Greg Nicotero.
Hi, my name is Coleman Domingo.
Hi, I'm Benai Garcia.
Hi, I am Mo Collins.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
And you are listening to another edition of the Cinik Radio Podcast. And I'm your host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my co-host and a couple of friendly neighborhood podcasters, Igrihe and Ryan. And on this week's show, we're really excited for this one because we break down and review Sony's latest superhero offering, Into the Spider-Verse. We also do a little bit of news for you because we are the Cinik Radio Podcast. Like, listen, subscribe, but most importantly, don't try to bring your fish on the plane. Sony is on a hot streak after the success of their partnership with Marvel and their solo movie Venom. Their latest offering is an animated effort which brings the Spider People together in one movie. But does it work? Let's talk about it. Ryan, the look of the movie, part comic book, part Pixar. What were your thoughts? And are we on the verge of a new age of superhero film?
From the look of the movie, it was phenomenal. I think it was just really unique. You know, I don't know all the technical stuff, but I know they did certain things with kind of like a different frame, kind of the frames per second, where I think half of what a typical movie is, which kind of gave it a kind of its own unique look. I think it's easily the most comic book looking comic book movie that we've ever had, and I love the little touches of kind of adding the words at different spots. Yeah, just the way it was animated, the way it looked like the pages of a comic book. You know, they really did an amazing job, even incorporating like the Spider-Ham, along with like the Spider Noir or whatever the name is. The way that they kind of incorporated the even the anime one, where it's kind of different styles of animation, but somehow was able to kind of seamlessly integrate into the movie. I thought it was really, really well done.
Well, if I was going to imagine a comic book fully animated and realized, it couldn't have been more perfect than what happened here. And the fact that they were able to bring all the different genres of different Spider-Man universes and characters into this singular movie and make it work, this movie kind of really hit me in the right spots for that. And I remember, and still from time to time read a lot of Spider-Man comics, and remember reading some of things like this much younger. Now, I haven't read much of the Miles Morales Spider-Man comics except for some things that I've found online, but I really enjoyed just all the different personalities and the fact that even there were different Peter Parkers that almost were the same kind of thing, right? There was one in Miles Morales' universe and one that came to be one of the main characters from another universe. The fact that they were different was awesome. So the animation style and the things that they did with this was really just the only way I think they could have made this work, because it really just brought comic pages to full motion and full interesting ways to do stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really thought it was a groundbreaking effort. I love the look of this movie. The look, the feel, the action. It just was extremely innovative all the way across the board. I was in shock how much I actually enjoyed it. I was in shock on how it was just really captivating the way that everything happened. The fights, the chase scenes, everything looked really, really crisp, looked really, really fresh, and it looked like a comic book come to life. Ryan, from the men behind the Lego movie, actually the man, because the story was only written by Philip Lord, but no Christopher Miller. Do you think there's some sort of trouble after the Solo debacle between the team? Because they seem to work together all the time. And based on their previous work, do you think the animated movies are their sweet spot?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess it was kind of conspicuous by his absence, and I did wonder, like, why isn't he there? I mean, I haven't heard anything, so I'm going to assume no. I think, obviously you have a situation where they obviously are a great team, even with teams that are going to have their own projects. So, I mean, I haven't heard anything, so I'm going to assume that there is no major falling out and that just kind of this was a passion project for him that he took on. I do think they work well animated, which is weird because I know that, I read one of the issues with Solo was that they were more into kind of improvising and kind of just letting things go. And it's, you feel like in animated, you really can't do that, but maybe there's a way of doing that with the voice acting. And I just don't know how the process is completely, but whatever the case is, I think, they really seem to get it right with animation. Even, the Lego Movie 2, I believe it's theirs, looks good. And, I think they have their own unique style, and I think when they're given free reign, it's successful. I think, with something like Solo, you just, you have Disney over you, and I think that they didn't work as well in that structure. But I would hope that they're just not a falling out, because they are a great team.
Yeah, they were definitely out of their element, Donnie. But they seem to hit the right notes with this. I wasn't a huge fan of the Lego movies, but I'm not saying they weren't good. And this was most definitely good. I mean, even though he only wrote it and didn't direct it, it was still a really good effort. It was a really good story. So I think that really is their niche. And IG, they could have cast nobodies, and I would have still loved this movie. But I'm admittedly not a fan of animated movies, but the one thing that they always seem to get right is the cast. So let's talk over about the heroes of the voiceover cast, which features Shamik Moore from Dope as Miles Morales. Jack Johnson from New Girl played the world-weary Peter Parker. Try saying that 3 times fast. Haley Steinfeld as Spider-Gwen. Who was the MVP as far as the heroes go, just on voice alone?
And quite honestly, I think Jack Johnson as the world-weary Spider-Man. But it's a really tight race, because everybody did a really fantastic job in their voice, in their portrayal of their respective Spider-Man. Even Nick Cage as Spider-Noir was great. And that's something I can't say about Nick Cage much lately, is that anything he's done is great, but he was spot on for this role. And it was just, everybody was put in the right spot to do the right thing for this. And you're right, they could have casted nobody and it wouldn't have made any difference, but the voices were just recognizable enough to make it just that much more interesting. And these guys, they do have some chops. Nick Cage has done some great things. Shamik Moore in Dope, if you've never seen it, he's really pretty good. And I love New Girl anyway, because Jack Johnson, that guy is great. And he always just kind of plays a slob, which fit perfectly. Yeah, Jake Johnson, I'm sorry. Fits perfectly into this role because he just plays the slob so well. So like his mannerisms and the way he speaks, it just fits so well. It just was beautifully casted. They really didn't have a lot of weak points in most of this movie. It was really well crafted, well acted, even though it was really voice acting. I've got a lot of good things to say about it.
How about you, Ryan? Who was your favorite hero?
I don't think you could pick one. I think they pretty much hit a home run with everybody they chose for the voices. And I'm thinking, I can't pick. I think everybody did what they needed to do. Whether it was kind of hitting more comedic notes with John Mulaney and Nicolas Cage, or even Liv Schreiber as Wilson Fisk.
We're just doing heroes.
Oh, heroes. Oh, sorry. Okay. So then I'll say I can't pick. Maybe I'll give Shamik Moore, because he had a lot to do. He was the lead. He was a star, and I think he knocked it out of the park. But again, I think everybody knocked it out of the park. So I'll go with Shamik Moore.
Going through Shamik's IMDb, I'm surprised he really hasn't done anything since Dope, and he was amazing in that. So maybe he was finishing college. Who knows? He was really, really good. But my hat's off to Nicolas Cage in this, mostly because I know how big of a superhero fan this guy is. I mean, Ghost Rider, he was almost Superman, and he had one of the best comic collections in the world. It was like a multi-million-dollar comic collection that he sold for Elvis's daughter when they were getting married, and they were only married for a few months. So that has to just rip him apart every single time, because when you give something up like that and then what you gave it up for doesn't last, it's just got to be gut-wrenching. Then there was the villains, featuring a fantastic Liv Schreiber as Kingpin, Catherine Hahn from Parks and Rec as Doc Ock. I'm not even going to try it. The dude from Moonlight. Mahershala Ali. I was saying it like for 10 minutes today, and I was like, I'm almost there. Nailed it. Anyway, as Miles' uncle in The Prowler. I mean, can an argument be made, IG, that the villains were even more strongly represented vocally than the heroes?
I think they were at least on par. And that's the thing about this whole movie. It's just really, really well voice acted. And there aren't many things that have come out, short of maybe Pixar movies, because they always really hit it out of the park, as far as animated films where the voice acting is so strong that you can get most of what you need from the movie just by listening to it. Not that the screen wasn't amazing to watch, that this movie was so colorful to watch that it really helped out. But then you get like Spider-Noir that's all black and white, and they even referenced that he was all black and white, which is hilarious. But then, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin in this with Liv Schreiber, he just has such a presence with his voice and the way that he speaks that it was just amazing to listen to. And the rest of the villains had that same essence about them. So you just don't end up with anything really poor across the board in the acting department in these movies. And there hasn't been something animated that I liked this much in a long time. And I've had a lot of things that I had super high hopes for. Like a year ago, they released The Killing Joke for DC, a Batman story that's supposed to be one of the best Batman stories ever. And I had read the graphic novel, and the animated movie that they made for it just wasn't that good. So the fact that they were able to put this out there and it's acted well and it's written well and it's beautiful to look at. Is it a 10 movie? Well, not quite, but it's still really, really good. And doing it from an animated standpoint when we're so used to like MCU movies, I don't know how you even top this.
Yeah, it was a really, really good effort. And I don't know why Mahershala Ali would. I mean, you've got to be a great actor with that name because nobody's going to learn to say your name otherwise. You look at that guy's performances in House of Cards and Moonlight, and he was just in the movie The Green Book, I believe it was called. That guy really can
he was
act.
He was the best part of Luke Cage too. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
He was the best. Yeah,
he was Cottonmouth, right? Absolutely amazing. I like how they kind of balance it out. And even though I didn't visually like the look of the Kingpin, Liv Schreiber was absolutely amazing. Like, I want him to play the Kingpin now. I mean, that's how terrifying his voice was. I agree with the IG. I mean, DC does this almost like this stop motion thing with their comic book movies sometimes, where it's like the comics are almost alive, but they're not. And I'm not a really big fan of that either. I really like the constant motion of this. Ryan, the heroes stayed pretty traditional, but they made some significant changes to the villains, whether it be gender, look, or concept. What do you think worked in these changes and what didn't work?
I'm not a huge fan, not a huge Spider-Man reader, at least not since I was, young. So I don't really know how it connects to like actual canon or how close it is. So really the main difference for me is that Doc Ock was a female. None of it really, I just went with it, so I didn't really come in with any expectations. I think, I actually loved the design of Kingpin. I thought it was really cool, kind of went with the comic. And again, the voice acting was menacing and, it just, yeah, it's like I don't want any other version of Kingpin now, and we just got an amazing version in the Daredevil comics. I mean, the Daredevil show, but I just kind of went with it. I was kind of happy with the villains. I thought they were all kind of interesting enough and unique enough powers, and the personal relationship with his uncle worked well and kind of gave you the feels when certain things happened.
Same thing with me. I like the change with Doc Ock because going through and thinking about all the Spider-Man villains, not many of them are female. And this works. I mean, the transition worked and they picked a great voice actress for it. So I really like that. What I didn't like was the Green Goblin. They made it into some sort of big monster. And like you said, I'm not sure if it's canon either. I'm not a fan. I like the old guy riding around on the little biped throwing pumpkins at everybody. I don't want him to be like a beast-looking thing, and I don't think it's needed. But I'm more of a purist. IG, what do you think?
I think I agree with both of you 100%. I mean, I guess the Scorpion wasn't as great a bad guy in this, but he served his purpose, which was just to advance the story. Green Goblin was awful. And I mean, if you don't have a Green Goblin riding a glider, tossing pumpkins, you're absolutely right. It's not the Green Goblin. We don't need to see these things that are so super mutated that it just takes you out of the story, because there's no way, no matter how good, smart, or lucky Spider-Man is, he should be able to beat that. And that's the DC problem, is that they keep putting these things up that nobody should be able to beat, and somehow they come up with some far-fetched idea that they're able to beat them. Luckily, it was a real minor, small part of the story. It didn't take over the whole thing with the Green Goblin. It was literally minutes in this hour-and-a-half long movie. So I didn't get too caught up into it. The rest of the villains, however, were spot on. I love Doc Ock in this. Dr. Octopus being a woman didn't take me out of it one bit. I don't need it to be Otto Octavius. It can be a female. That's fine, because it was well acted. I love the design of the costume. I love how it interacted with everything. It worked. And so did pretty much every other villain, especially the uncle. Like, what was he? What was his name? Psycho or Prowler. I don't remember that bad guy from anywhere else, but I loved his inclusion. And I loved that it tied the villains to the heroes in the story in a much more intimate manner than we get in a lot of other things, except for maybe Thor, who fights his brother all the time.
Ryan, did you notice, like I did, the original Spider-Man montage, even though it was quick, gives hints that it may take place in the original Raimi trilogy? The upside down kiss with Mary Jane, the train stopping the dance moves.
Yeah. So I noticed that. And that was a great little nod to some of the good and some of the really bad of that original trilogy. Right away, that kind of, it was cool to kind of, I think there was on some level a nod to all the different, maybe not. I think I read there was like a nod to all of the movies. So I didn't really think to pick out like, if they touched on Homecoming or the Amazing Spider-Man movies at all, but I thought it was it was really cool that they kind of there was a bit of an ode to what was what had come before it.
Well, and not only that, I was going to save this for later in the show, but I think this is a genius move to move away from Tom Holland's Spider-Man and carve out their own little niche of the Spidey universe and use some of these other characters in movies and keep him over in the MCU, at least for now. That you don't, you're dealing with a completely different Spider-Man era there, where the origin story that you've produced in the last movie now doesn't have to stay along with the movies that you're making. And if they do that, I think it's a really ingenious idea. What do you think, Ike?
I think that hits it right on the spot, because they've basically just shown us that there are complete other universes where Spider-Man exists. And that's what we have here. And Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Spider-Man Far From Home, that's supposed to be coming next year, and everything going on with the MCU can exist where it is without having to have any interruption with what's going on with Into the Spider-Verse, because now we're under the assumption that everything that's happening here is happening in a completely different universe or a different parallel dimension. And that works beautifully, because why not? Why shouldn't we have it like this? And this can exist along with the other one without having to talk about each other. And that makes it beautiful and perfect. And I like that they're all not trying to steal or bombard each other's space, because they can exist. They can both be Spider-Man, and they can both keep making movies and showing us amazing things without having to beat the other one out of any kind of position.
Well, and there's been whispers of a sequel to the Venom movie. Everybody wanted, where's Spider-Man? We want Spider-Man in Venom. But Ryan, would you be ultra disappointed at this point if it wasn't Tom Holland, Spider-Man, that showed up, but somebody playing Miles Morales swinging in and going to combat against Venom?
It doesn't matter if it's good. I think, I like them kind of being part of their own separate universes right now. Venom has a completely different tone from the Homecoming and what I'm assuming Far From Home is going to be. It's got a different tone from this movie. So, I'm okay if they let, bring in a completely different version of Spider-Man. If they bring in Tom Holland, great, I guess, as long as it's not shoehorning him in, and then they kind of commit themselves to something narrative wise that they wouldn't, except that they want to make some extra money, by saying, hey, Spider-Man's in this movie, come check out Venom too, so yeah, I'd rather them not shoehorn it, but I'm okay with whatever they go with, as long as it makes for a good story, it makes for something interesting.
Me myself, I would love to see a Miles Morales Spider-Man end up in the Venom universe. I think that maybe going away from, with these other properties, taking the Venom property and moving away from the Spider-Man that's attached to the MCU and going Miles Morales gives them an opportunity to embrace widening out the spectrum from the quote-unquote white superhero that tends to run over everywhere. Miles Morales has done a great job in the few comics that I have read with him in it, and I think he's a very interesting Spider-Man. So having him take the lead and just kind of positioning this as like a sub-parallel universe off of where the MCU is existing is a great idea. So I'd be more in favor of that than bringing Tom Holland over. It
would increase the chances that Spider-Man stays where he belongs with the Avengers and with everybody else kind of crossing over into his movies. And Sony continues to play nice with Marvel, so Disney doesn't need to go buy Sony to get the property back. Ryan, facts show that the concept of the alternate universe has been done more in the superhero genre than there are actually alternate universes. But the engine that makes this car go is the fact that Wilson Fisk is trying to reconnect with his family that passed away. Did his evil scheme have enough meat on the bone to drive the movie? And would you risk your current reality to bring back someone you loved?
It barely works. I think I understood it, but then there were all these logical issues of, well, what are they going to remember? Are they going to be okay being in this new reality? There's just so many logical issues, but you can understand that, and I would do the same. Or I would maybe attempt something, but again, I would also probably consider all the alternatives, consider what they'd be thinking. I think it worked just enough to give him just enough motivation to see why he kind of was in this mode of wanting to stop at nothing. It also kind of gave him, just that bit of pause when they're going to, run away. And I think that was the important thing in the end. Not that I want to get to the end, but I think it pays off a little bit in the end with how he does react to seeing them. So yeah, I think it could have worked better if they gave him a little bit more backstory and gave him a little bit more time, but I think it worked just enough that you kind of buy it and buy into what he's doing and why he's doing it.
Not only that, this is such a crapshoot that even if he reconnected with his loved ones, we see the slight differences in each universe. They might have not even been married in that universe, or they might have been separated, or she may have had a restraining order against them. Who knows? It's not a given that even if he's able to bring them back in that manner, that they're going to even be the same people. That was a little sketchy for me. The main attraction of the story, though, is the big screen origin of Miles Morales. IG, how much did you know about Miles going into the movie?
Not enough. Really, all I knew about him is that he was the new Spider-Man. I did like the origin, and I thought it was kind of almost comical how just nonchalantly he ended up getting bit by the spider, and while he was standing there getting bit by it, he just nonchalantly knocked it off of his hand. And if that's the way it did in the comic book, you know what? Kudos to them. Because do we need all this big buildup or anything? Or can it just kind of happen? And does it really matter at this point? Haven't we seen enough origins of especially any Spider-Man iteration that we really need to know why or how Spider-Man is Spider-Man? Can't we just drive by it really quick and just get into some story? And they really did that pretty fast. Although one of the things they did that I loved was they showed the parallel of him becoming Spider-Man to the original Spider-Man comics when he's seeing Peter Parker in the comic becoming Spider-Man, learning that he sticks to stuff and everything else and basically going through the same motions. And I thought that was well done and hilarious all at the same time. So they spent some time doing some origin, but they only spent a little bit of time, where so many of these other movies, they just keep spending so much time doing it. We know what happened to make Spider-Man. We don't need 45 minutes of the movie to be dedicated to how did he become Spider-Man anymore. And that's one of the things they did. They did 5 minutes on it. And that was plenty.
Well, I did enjoy that. And unlike every zombie movie or superhero movie, once Miles was bitten, which he's more of a man than I am, by the way, because if anything, and Ryan, you could back me up here, if anything bites me in the subway, I'm going to freak out. Whether it be a spider, a rat, a homeless person, I'm going to freak out and run right to the doctors. But we don't have to deal with an hour of who am I, what am I. Spider-Man is a living, breathing hero in that universe. Ryan, I'm going to throw this to you. Stuck in similar circumstances, who would you want to be your superhero mentor?
I would say Batman, but I know there's a better choice out there, so I'm going to say Batman for now and maybe change my mind after you guys decide on your mentor.
Oh my goodness, you could even go out of Marvel into DC. We're talking literally about all Marvel properties here, and you're like, I'm going to go over to this other one over here, talk about a guy with no superpowers, so doesn't have any point of reference. His origin story is because he got scared by a bat as a kid. And so, nothing going on there. That's your choice. Oh, geez, Ryan,
tactician.
Come on.
He's found a way to defeat Superman, so...
Which is not a Spider-Man property. He's not in any way a brilliant tactician. He's purely like a teenager through almost all iterations that have been there. And you're going to go to the tactician where he doesn't know how
to learn from somebody who has no powers but can stand toe-to-toe with gods, then that will enhance my own powers.
Well, number one, he's been proven to be really, really hard and a bad leader for wards. I mean, look at Titans. Poor Dick Grayson's first words on the show Titans is "fuck Batman" because he screwed him over so bad. And number two, to be fair, any really, really good rock collector could beat Superman in a heartbeat because he's just going to have kryptonite lying around and he's not going to know it. Beating Superman really isn't a big deal, as much of a big deal as it used to be. How about you, IG? Who would you pick for your superhero mentor?
Wow. Well, now if I could pick anybody, it would probably be Doctor Strange, just with everything that he's able to do with the mystical ways. He might be able to teach me a thing or two, or at least turn back time if I screw something up really badly.
You just want to wear a flamboyant cape.
Yeah, I want a cape. And I mean, one of those costumes had a cape.
Listen, I'm going to go with the Ric Flair of superheroes. If I was to get a superhero mentor, it would be Tony Stark. Ryan, one of my favorite parts of the movie is the ride to school in the squad car. With Miles' dad, it really showed the relationship and the complexity of it. But has a parent or family member ever gone out of their way to embarrass you like that in front of people?
Not intentionally like that, but my dad would always kind of, when I was young, like if we were going out with the group, he would always be like, like I remember distinctly, like, there was a time in New York where like getting on the last subway car was like dangerous. And I think, at this point when I was like 13, 14, like that wasn't really the case anymore. But I remember getting like, there was a group of us getting on the train and my dad had kind of walked us at the sub train and he was kind of telling us kind of as we were getting on, like, don't get on the back car. It's dangerous. Don't get on the back car. It can be dangerous. I remember being really embarrassed by that. But otherwise, he never really tried to embarrass me. But that's kind of what I can remember.
Now, have you done it to any of your kids where you've intentionally embarrassed them?
Oh, yeah. Trying to think. I know I have. Maybe not recently, but I absolutely have.
Well, now I used to like pick random days when my oldest daughter was going to school when I was living in Hawaii and drive by her bus stop and yell out the windows, "I love you!" Like, and everybody knew who I was and knew who I was saying it to, and I would do it when like everybody's standing there, and there were like 30 kids that got on at her bus stop. And she was just like, you just watch her face just melt and down into her hands trying to hide. It was the greatest. And of course I got that from my parents, but there was only like 5 kids at my bus stop, so not so bad.
I've never done anything remotely that embarrassing to embarrass a kid like that. However, once one of my girlfriend's moms showed up at her house to pick up my girlfriend, and her mom had a little bit too much to drink and started getting real mouthy and yelling, and my mom flew out of that door and was ready to fight that lady, and I needed to carry her back in, and basically the whole neighborhood was watching. So that was probably the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me, but kudos for mom for being willing to throw down with the drunk. However, one of my friends dropped her kids off at school the other day, and she's a big heavy metal fan. It was nice and quiet, and she thought she had the windows up, but she didn't, and she was thrashing out to her music. And when she turned around, the whole school was watching her, and her son couldn't be any more embarrassed. So I love that story. Ryan, the gates are opened to the alternate universes by the Kingpin particle accelerator, and we end up with the Spider-Man Collective, which they should have really called this Into the Spider-Diverse, including Spider-Noir, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Ham. Which of the characters worked for you, and which ones didn't?
They all worked. I think they all kind of played their own role, kind of Peter as the mentor, Spider-Noir as kind of comic, well, Spider-Noir and Spider-Ham is kind of comic relief, but actually kind of interesting and great voice acting. Maybe the one that had the least to do was the mech Spider-Man, whatever, I forget which
the anime Spider.
The anime Spider, yeah. If any of them didn't work, like I think that one just seemed to have the least to do. But even that I was fine with. I didn't, she was part of the team, seemed like part of the team, and I loved it. I think that part was really great. I think it was the first. Outside of The Incredibles, we talk often about how like The Incredibles is the best Fantastic Four movie. This, the brief time that they're together, is among the best family or group team of superheroes. You really felt like in the brief time they were together that they were a real team and they cared about each other and they were really looking out for each other, and they did something in maybe the 20 or 30 minutes that they were together that all the Fantastic Four movies and plenty of other kind of team up movies have tried to do, Justice League, and tried and failed to do.
I went into this movie thinking that they're going to play Spider-Ham to death, that they were just going to just beat it and beat it and beat it, and they were going to play to little kids through this whole thing, and Spider-Ham was going to show up 5 minutes into it and just be annoying through the whole thing.
Jar Jar Spider-Ham?
And they didn't do it. They used the right amount of most of these characters that I wasn't taken out of the story like for more than a few seconds at a time at any given point. Like when Spider-Ham pulled out the big hammer, I was momentarily pulled out. But then, like, they only spent like 30 seconds with him doing anything. And then it went right back to the other Spider-Men that were more believable. The comic relief is fun, and I don't mind it one bit. And even the MCU does things with comic relief. They just do it differently. So having that in there, I don't think takes away from your story, doesn't take away from your movie. And I was only pulled out momentarily, and I was able to slide right back in. So the thing is while I probably agree that the mech spider was probably the least entertaining of the group, it still had its place. And Spider-Ham could have been a horrible wreck in this movie, and it wasn't. I was pleasantly surprised at the amount he was used in it and that it worked with him used in it, because they could have really killed the movie with that singular character alone, but he was played just the right amount. So I'm pretty pleased with how they used all of the different Spider-Men in this.
Well, John Mulaney is a brilliant comic. I just think it was a waste. The mech spider had no place in the movie, and I don't know how or why it's Spider-Man other than the operator being Penny Parker. It just didn't fit, and you're right. I was a little worried about the Spider-Ham too, and I don't want to take it too seriously because it is a comic book film, but I couldn't stop rolling my eyes every single time they showed him on the screen. It reminded me of App City from the last time that we recorded. It was from the mind of an 8-year-old. This was a one-note joke that should have went away, and for some reason it continues to show back up, and it doesn't even make any sense because if he was a pig and then he got bit by a radioactive spider, he would just be Spider Pig, and he wouldn't speak English, and it just didn't make any sense to me, and I hated it.
The Simpsons own that, I think. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. IG, one of the big reveals during the movie was when Miles Morales' cool Uncle Aaron turned out to be the supervillain, the Prowler. What do you think Aaron would have done if he wasn't shot by the Kingpin first once he found out that Miles was Spider-Man?
Well, I don't think he would have hurt Miles in any way, shape, or form. I think that whatever he was in the midst of doing would have stopped, and he may have even turned against the rest of the villains at the time. I think that singular moment that he really did show, and they did a good job of showing in this movie, how much he cared for Miles, that he probably would have turned everything right around and tried to help Miles in that moment. So that's my belief as of where it was sitting right then, because was he putting the mask back on? Yes, but that wasn't necessarily because he was going to do something to Miles, because I don't think he would have in any shape or form.
What do you think, Ryan? Do you agree?
He seemed like he was shocked. He was genuinely shocked, and I think there was a genuine relationship there. So I don't think he would have harmed him. So that created the uncle dying for him, and that's kind of what he needs as his kind of motivator throughout. And it'll be interesting to see how they play with that, because I thought they were going to go the route of the father hating Spider-Man even after the events of how the movie ends, and then that he would be kind of an antagonist for Miles Morales' Spider-Man moving forward. But it seems like they didn't go that route, which I'm kind of glad. It was kind of a little sarcastic, got a little cynical about that, I guess, when it happened. It's like, oh, okay, this is going to be a kind of convoluted war between the two, not realizing it is its son. So I'm kind of glad they didn't go that route. But yeah, no, to answer your question, I don't think he would have done anything to harm Miles.
Well, as similar as Peter and Miles are, as far as their origin story goes, Ryan, do you think they did a good job distinguishing the two, not only as people, but heroes?
There are some parallels to them being kind of high school students and dealing with all the crap in high school, but they just come from different lives and different worlds. And so, I think they did a good job distinguishing him as a character. And I think, one thing you can do with an animated film that you really can't do with live action is, even Tom Holland, who I think we all agree, is the best Peter Parker that we've gotten on the screen. He's still older. He's playing a freshman in high school, and he was at that point, 18, 19, he's going to be playing a sophomore at 20 years old. We got the same with Tobey Maguire, with Andrew Garfield. We're getting older actors kind of trying to pull off the high school thing, which just doesn't quite work. It worked pretty well with Tom Holland, but in this case, when you do it animated, you can kind of really lean into that, and so he really feels like he's just barely in high school. He's barely going through puberty. So there's definitely something that you get animated that maybe we don't get live action, and I kind of really appreciated that. And yeah, no, it definitely felt kind of like a different character from Peter Parker, but at the same time, very, very close parallels. And they even, they really, again, lean into that as he's kind of figuring out his powers. They really lean into like the parallels between him and Peter Parker kind of going through his own kind of transformation into Spider-Man.
IG, the team forces Morales to show that he can do it. It's just a leap of faith, and Miles answers the call and joins the team in the final battle. But where did that rank? This crisis, this challenge, him finding out that he actually is Spider-Man. Where does it rank in terms of heroic moments in superhero films? And what did you think of his choice of the black and red spray-painted hoodie uniform?
I like the uniform. The uniform is pretty cool, and it differentiates him from the rest of the Spider-Men. That many of the costumes, I mean, if you look at Peter Parker's Spider-Man and even Spider-Ham, they're very similar costumes. So getting this different costume helps some. I think, actually having to go out there and get in something from where he was at, the hero's journey that he took in this, he went plenty far, and it ranked pretty well in this movie. So it's not necessarily the greatest journey that any hero has taken in any of the more recent comic book movies, but I think it was a substantial journey. And so I really did appreciate it. I thought it was really well done, and I thought it was just enough to keep me interested should they decide to do sequels, which at this point I'm pretty sure they're going to do, because I think this is going to make some serious money because it is really entertaining. I'm probably going to see it again.
Ryan, your thoughts on the final battle, the movie, and your rating?
Final battle, if anything, that was, is little, as you get in all the superhero movies, there that final third act battle is a bit of a chaotic mess. I think it makes up for it because, again, the relationship between the characters was so strong that you really felt like they were working as a team and working together and really pulling for each other, and there was definitely kind of emotional stakes in the outcome. So I liked that part. Again, I'm not a big fan of crazy, wild, chaotic third act, but it's kind of par for the course with this stuff, so I'm okay with it. It is what it is. But I love the movie. I think it is easily the best animated comic book movie. I would say it's up there with The Incredibles as far as the best superhero movie. But I think it really knocks out of the park. The animation was great. I think the cool thing also is we're so used to kind of the Pixar style animation that as good as the animation is for all those movies, they all end up looking the same. And so this just had such a different look that was great. And again, it looked like a comic book come to life. Like, I don't know that you can do it better. Just throughout, there were so many unique, interesting things that they did that I almost feel like I have to go see it 2, 3, 4 times just to kind of catch all the stuff they did. And also, with animated movies, like, I'm a bigger fan than you, Cinik, of animated movies, but if you get me to really buy into it and kind of forget that I'm kind of buy into the characters as real people and not just animated characters, I think then you've done a good job as a movie. And so this really did that. Like, I really kind of bought into it. I was involved emotionally, and I really felt the stakes. And yeah, the voice cast was phenomenal. I thought the story was really good. It really is the hero's journey, and he really goes on that. And if you almost want to look at a story that really takes you through all those steps, this is it. And so I really, again, I think it's among the best comic book movies, period. And I'll give it a 9.25.
Ryan said it perfectly, that this is a comic book brought to life, and it's not that we need live action to do that. The animation style here was about as good as you're ever going to get without going full CGI look where you're trying to make it look real but it still looks animated. This looks animated, but it feels really good. The movement is smooth. I love the little nuances, like when Peter Parker is trying to teach Miles how to swing, and he's like, all right, and thwip, and you see the thwip text come out by the hand, thwip. And we're all used to seeing that on the page, but nobody's ever really said it anywhere. And here they did it. Little nuances like that really could have gone either direction, but in this instance, they worked perfectly. Everything that happened in this movie, just from the look, from the feel, from the story to the acting, was done as well as I think you can do on an animated movie. And I'm hoping that they're able to surprise me in the future and go even further, even better. But this is what I would consider a near perfect take in an animated Spider-Man movie or an animated superhero movie in that aspect. I enjoyed it, and even the soundtrack in this had some really good music, so I really just had a good time all the way through. Very little actually took me out in it, but there were a couple of small moments. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I really enjoyed it, and like I said, I'm probably going to see it again.
I'm not going to lie. These guys forced me to watch this movie at gunpoint because I'm kind of a Scrooge when it comes to the whole animated thing. But since I was a little boy, and I've said this on previous podcasts, I've always wanted to be Spider-Man growing up. I've loved Spider-Man, so I don't know if I would have saw it if we weren't going to review it or not. There's a lot of movies out, and I probably would have just jumped to Aquaman or something else. But for me, this movie was a solid 9, and it turned me around on so many things, and Sony did a great job in this. I am not a fan of repackaging heroes just to sell us something different in the same box. It drives me crazy when they do it. I just think there's no real genius involved in throwing somebody else in somebody else's uniform and just calling them that. But they turned me around on Miles Morales. I'm a fan. They turned me around on Spider-Gwen. I'm a fan. And this was a genius way to carve out their own niche in our friendly neighborhood and leave the original in the MCU. The animation worked. The humor was on point. And although I wasn't a fan of some of the changes they made to the villains, it was very compelling and it was a fun ride. And I will definitely not be forced into going to see the next one. I'll go willingly with an open mind, money in hand, and popcorn in lap. All right, IG, let's do a little bit of news.
Well, my first news story comes from East Rutherford, New Jersey, and people this weekend got an early Christmas. An armored truck was spilling $100 bills flying over a stretch of busy highway near Route 17. And people were diving out of their cars. Apparently, even 2 collisions caused during the ensuing chaos, but no injuries reported.
So it's funny. I have a friend who was apparently we were working out together that day, and he told me he was driving on the highway when that happened. Now, is it right that like they're going to try to catch all the people that took money and force them to give the money back, or they'll face some kind of legal consequences? If it's on security video or whatever. Is that true, or is that part of the story?
Well, they do want the money to come back. Part of the story is saying that technically it is theft of mislaid property. But if people bring money back, they're not looking to charge anybody. They're just looking to get the money back to Brinks. I myself thinking if I'd gone and picked up a couple $1,000, $100 bills laying on the highway, I don't know if I'm willing to believe the police in today's day and age about they're not going to do anything to me if I bring it back. But then there's a part of me that would feel guilty about holding on to the money. So I don't know. Maybe my choice at that point was if I didn't want to hold on to the money or use it for my own stuff, maybe some charity could really use it this holiday season. But I don't know. Cops lately have been known to kind of turn around really quickly and do something bad to someone trying to make the right choice.
I can't imagine that they would charge anybody that would willingly bring money back in. And if this was any other nice state like Rhode Island or South Carolina, maybe some of that money came back, but this is dirty Jersey. None of that money is ever going to be seen again, and nobody's going to talk either. So Brinks, this is on you, and Merry Christmas to the Garden State.
So my next news story, of course, we need to beat up an airline at least once an episode here on the Cinik Radio podcast, and again, it's Southwest. And those dirty bastards forced a passenger to leave their pet fish at the airport. Lannis Paulus was bringing her pet fish to go home from school for some period of time at the Denver International, and Southwest ticket agents at the gate just told her that no, she couldn't take her little betta fish onto the aircraft with her. They said that their policy only allows for cats and dogs to go into the cabin, and she is devastated.
I'm not clear whether she brought it in a sealed container or if she just had an open bowl of water that's going to spill out all over the place and the fish is going to be flopping when they land. But if you're going to travel and you're going to bring anything other than yourself and your luggage, maybe you should check in and see what the policy is before you show up at the gate and blame I'm actually kind of with Southwest on this. If somebody didn't follow protocol, then yeah, it's on Southwest. But if she didn't check before she decided to bring her fish to the gate, I kind of think it's on her. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of need to know what the policies are with these airlines, and just in general, like the airlines are pretty shitty when it comes to animals to begin with. And we've heard a lot of stuff lately about sketchy stuff that they do with dogs, and a lot of them are changing their own policies. So yeah, I feel like it's on you to know what the policy is for bringing a fish. And I just feel like with the liquid policies and everything, it sucks to tell a kid like, hey, you can't bring your pet, but it's on the parent to figure out what the policy is and try to work around that.
Well, now this is a sophomore at University of Colorado, so it's not like a little kid trying to bring their fish.
I don't know how attached you could be to a fish, and I'm not being a cold-hearted bastard here, but it's not like your dog, it's not like a cat. Fish really don't have personality or souls for that matter. That's why we can eat them. I forgot completely about the liquid policy. You're right, Ryan. She has no place bringing that fish on. She could have blew up the whole plane with that thing.
Yeah, it's more than 3 ounces of fluid, right? You can't bring more than 3 ounces. That's everybody knows that. So you literally trying to come in with 12 or more ounces of fluid in a bowl and say, let me on the plane. She's trying to kill us all, I think.
Well, she should have bought that fish after she got out of TSA.
So we talked about this during our review here, but the Venom sequel has been confirmed after a massive showing at the global box office, breaking records all over the world in all kinds of different markets. Nobody should be surprised that Venom already has a sequel in development.
Bring me some Cletus Cassidy. I don't know about you, Ryan, but I'm ready for some straight-up carnage. The first movie didn't disappoint. I know it wasn't perfect, but I mean, coming from Sony, it was a hit because they did just enough right to make it a fun ride where I wanted to see a sequel, and I'm frankly excited for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we in our review, it said like, look, Venom is a terrible movie, but it is really entertaining. And I think Tom Hardy's performance is just batshit crazy enough that it makes me want to see a sequel. So I'm kind of glad they've got a sequel. I hope they do right by Carnage. I hope that they do try to work on some of the things that they kind of enhance what they got right about this and the things that worked, and maybe write it a little bit better. Not as there's a lot they could fix. So let's hope that they fix what they can fix, and they kind of go run with what was good about this movie. But I'm excited about the sequel. Always was. And seeing Woody Harrelson and Tom Hardy kind of chewing scenery when they're not Venom and Carnage will also be pretty hysterical and should be good. So I'm excited that it's gonna be a solid movie.
Well, now, you may say that the Venom movie was a bad movie, but you still gave it a halfway decent review when we did talk about it. I
also said it was terrible.
So it's not as bad as some other movies that we've seen, Batman versus Superman. But, truth be told, I mean, it can't be all that bad when it does the numbers it's done. It's really been a fun ride, and to their credit, Sony has really started kicking up the game a notch or two when they're trying to hit these superhero franchises, because they were headed down a dark hole with Spider-Man for a long time, and now they're really on the upswing with these two and Venom. I'm excited to see what they can do, and if we can get some properly done Carnage, man, I am in. 100%.
Well, not only that, I believe it's Amy Pascal who's leading the ship here. And if this next Venom movie works, they've got to go back and do that Sinister Six movie that they were talking about during the last trilogy, because I would love to see that.
So my next story comes in a time when rednecks are ruining the rest of the country and everything is awful. My favorite redneck in the world, Kid Rock, with the kindness of his heart, goes into a Nashville Walmart and pays off $81,000 worth of things that people have on layaway just in time for Christmas.
Well, I hope one of those people was Joy Behard's layaway at Kmart or Walmart or wherever this was. It's Christmas time. It always kind of touches me whenever somebody does that, because obviously if you have things on layaway, you don't have the money to pay. When I worked retail, when I was a young lad, most of those layaways got put back because people just didn't have enough money to pay them off. So the fact that any star, any celebrity, no matter what you think about him or his music, would come do this, it's a big deal. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, it sounds good. I think there are plenty. A lot of those stories kind of come up every year around Christmas time. So you wonder. I get kind of cynical about it. I think like Tyler Perry did something similar recently. Not a particularly big Kid Rock fan, so it's good that he did that, and I hope that more celebrities do it. I always kind of, I guess you can't win in this situation, because I kind of like when people do things and they don't seek out publicity, but then if they don't seek out publicity, we don't know. But I always kind of get a little cynical when it's like they did it and then they got to let everybody know about it. But yeah, I mean, it's a good deed and it's cool, and I hope more people do it, whether or not they kind of seek out the attention because of it.
Well, you got to tell people, and one of the things that happens is Tyler Perry told people, because Kid Rock's tweet on this was him at Tyler Perry saying, "Great idea. I followed your lead and paid off the layaway at my local Walmart in Nashville. Merry Christmas and God bless you." That's a direct quote from Kid Rock's Twitter. And if more people and celebrities and people that are well off see these things and continue the trend, what does it hurt? I mean, really, it said that Tyler Perry paid off $400,000 worth of layaways at Georgia Walmarts. What's $400,000 to Tyler Perry? It's really not much. And there's a lot of people that could do a lot of good with a little bit of their money. And rather than buying the next supercar or another mansion or an island in the Bahamas, how many families get affected by going in and doing these things? And some of the things people are putting on layaway are shoes and pants and clothes and necessities in their home that they simply can't afford, and they're trying to hope that they can get it paid off at some point so that they can do something. And if spreading the word of mouth gets other celebrities to kind of maybe even feel guilty and go off and do it on their own, I'm all for it. So yeah, maybe they are tooting their own horn a little bit, but maybe they're also guilting some other celebrities into getting on the same horse and doing some of the same stuff. I'm all for it, and I think it's a great thing that it happened. And even if they're the only two that actually say they did it, maybe there's some other that will go out and do it just because they did it. So my next, oh my God, are you serious moment comes from California, who now wants to tax text messaging. They're saying that if they put a surcharge on text messaging, they can fund programs that'll make phone service available to the poor. Now, they're not talking about just regular phone service or cheap, like you have access to a phone that they can hardwire to a wall wherever you're living. They're talking about giving poor people smartphones with messaging services and LTE and everything else so that they can have access to everything that everybody else has. Now, I myself don't think that I should have to subsidize somebody else's iPhone. I pay for mine and my family's, and I don't think I should have to pay for Joe Blow down the block because he doesn't want to work like I work.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. I mean, for as much good in the world as California does, because they do start a lot of environmental stuff that needs to be done. I love the state. I love the weather, but sometimes they're absolutely batshit crazy with some of this stuff. You don't work, you don't have a phone. What's next? We're going to throw an extra tax on shoes so everybody can have Skechers. I don't understand this need. Not everybody is deserved or owed everything, and that's part of the benefit of working. It's part of the reason why I go to work every day is so I can afford the things that I want to afford. If you give everything to everybody, they won't want to work.
But they will give people already, like they had the Obama phone program where you could get a phone that would allow you to make and take phone calls up to so many minutes a month, that they weren't necessarily smartphones, but you had a way to communicate so that if you were applying for jobs or doing whatever, you had a phone number, you had a way to be reached. And I'm okay with that. But if they're saying that I need to have more taxes put on my phones so that they can give smartphones to everybody that doesn't work or doesn't want to work, because I know some people that just don't want to work and they have cell phones and they're like, well, I have my Obama phone. That's all I need. Well, I don't want them to get the next generation smartphone because they want to live on the same plan. At least that's my view on it. What do you think, Ryan?
But Ryan, my question to you is, before you answer that, who pays the taxes when they start texting everybody?
It's a dumb idea. Clearly it's a ridiculous idea. No, I think that I'm sure if we look at the details, there's more to it. And it's kind of a funny headline. And with a lot of these stories, I think if you look a little bit deeper, there's more to the story. But either way, I think it doesn't make sense to tax. No, I would say, being charitable, I would hope, I'd like to think that most people that are going to that do need this, let's say that they do need a phone or they do need access to text messaging, that they're not doing it because they just want to sit back and kind of mooch off the system, but that maybe, for whatever reason they've fallen on hard times, they need whatever, and they're, they will, look, they're going to try looking for a job and they want to work, whatever. Whatever the case is, like, clearly we do sometimes need to give people, people do need, we need social programs, we need programs to help people. And if a cell phone is something that's necessary, as Ig pointed out, then you have programs for that. You fund that in other ways. I don't think you need to tax people on text messaging to fund a program like that. You can find money in your budget for stuff like that. And yeah, I think, California does have lots of great programs, but then every few months you hear something out of California that's like, whoa, that's way too liberal even for me. So I think that's a step too far. Trying to tax people for text messages is just kind of silly. And I think, eventually they abandoned the idea once kind of word got out that this is kind of dumb, and there was a good deal of backlash because of it.
Now, you said something interesting there, Ryan, which was like what if someone needs text messaging? I'm not sure that unless you talk to my teenage daughter who really believes she needs text messaging. Nobody needs
text messaging. I was using that as an example. Just like there are situations, I think we often kind of loop everybody into the same thing. So you kind of often it's like, okay, well, I don't want to subsidize people who just want to, let's say take a phone in and not do anything to work for it. And yes, there are going to be people like that, but there are also a lot of people who were subsidizing them because they can't find work and they're trying and they want to find work. So I think that's
no. I'm not saying people don't need a phone.
No. So.
Because I'm saying people do need a phone.
Yeah, but he's saying that it's not right to group people together. But what percentage, Ryan, is allowable to you before you say, all right, that's enough? How much of abuse of the system would you allow?
Look, I think it depends on what's the available resources. For me, I think, I'll err on the side of taking care. I'd rather not have, kids starve and people who are earnestly want to work. And if it means that there's going to be a certain percentage, I'm willing to, whatever percentage does not cause a collapse in our, society, I'm willing to deal with, because I'd like to think it's not that high of a number, but regardless, I think the other part is, I think it's kind of funny. Oh, do we really need text messaging? Well, we're in our society right now, like people need Facebook, and I think it might sound silly, but there are certain ways of interacting in this world that, how many people, like, how often have you actually answered a phone call that wasn't from a family member, in the last couple of months, and so I think we increasingly communicate via social media, via text messaging. So I don't think it's unrealistic to say that, a person does need that as a mode of communication, because that it is becoming increasingly a primary mode of communication, even in the workplace, among friends. So, I've had situations where jobs where people have reached out to me via text and for a job interview, or for and even when I am working, most of my jobs, that's their primary mode of communicating with me. So, it kind of sounds silly, but it is part of the world we live in now, and I don't think it's going to go, and it's only going to become more of a part of that world.
So my last story, because we are the Cinik Radio podcast and we love us some Star Wars. Pedro Pascal, who was most recently on the Game of Thrones, has been revealed as the Mandalorian, the new live-action Star Wars series coming to Disney Plus when that goes live.
All the casting I've heard from this has been amazing. Like, they're really picking some interesting people to be on this show, and the fact that he's going to be the lead, Prince Oberyn for days. That guy was on Game of Thrones for such a short period of time and made probably some of the biggest impact that any characters made on the show. And all of that was Pedro Pascal's acting. It was good writing, but his acting really, really stood out. So I can't wait to see what he does the role, and it makes me more and more ready for the show by the day.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was easily the best. Well, he's the best part of that season and one of the best characters on the show. Kind of like if you do like pound for pound, he's like the best character in the history of Game of Thrones. I mean, and he was that good of a character. I would not be happy. I mean, I would not be upset if they like basically just took the Red Viper out of accent and all and put him in The Mandalorian. Like, that's how cool he was. But he's a great actor. A great choice as a lead. Seems like they really, we've only seen a couple shots, but the picture, shots look great. Weird casting, but Giancarlo Esposito, Nick Nolte, Carl Weathers, just interesting, kind of casting. Gina Carano. Okay, maybe not the greatest actress in the world, but hey, they're wearing a mask. There's rumors that Sabine might show up. So I'm excited. Initially, it sounded interesting, but as I hear more about the show, with casting, some little plot details that are kind of leaking, I'm really, it's really sounding interesting.
The casting looks interesting enough to keep me interested there, and Pedro Pascal is a big add to this. But seeing that it's produced by Jon Favreau, who really got this whole MCU started with Iron Man, that's pure Jon Favreau. So the fact that they put him in charge of this, I'm fully excited in this, and adding Pedro to this just made it go up that one more notch. Granted, I am a Star Wars fanboy. My whole life since I was 5 years old has been basically nothing but Star Wars. But this looks like it's got some real chances to be amazing. So I'm excited about it, and I hope all you are too. I can't wait for them to announce when they're going to launch Disney Plus and when we're actually going to be able to watch The Mandalorian. And that's it for this episode of the Cinik Radio Podcast. I'm Igrihe. We had a great time bringing you this week's show. Please send all your comments, questions, concerns, and any crazy news stories from your neck of the woods to CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. And find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. Continue to like, listen, subscribe, and share this with all your friends and family. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.